Confidence. What is it and how do we get more of it? We can definitely understand that it correlates to the best performances. This makes a lot of sense. This is something that I think everybody understands. But what is it? We have to start with the definition. And I think the best way to define it is that confidence is an emotional estimation of our abilities. So there's kind of two elements here. There's the emotional element, and then there's actually your abilities. So these are two separate things. So we have to understand both of these things to begin to know what we can do to increase our confidence, because we cannot summon it from the heavens above. We cannot create it out of nothing. Confidence is a byproduct of two major areas. One, the feedbacks that you're getting as a player from the game and elsewhere. And then the other one is your actual ability. So of course, the more ability that you have, the more confidence that you can have. But the problem is for a lot of people is they become quite outcome oriented in how they move around as a player. And because of the emotional impact that certain things can have in the game, if you're kind of programmed incorrectly, if you don't have the right things set up, you're going to be really heavily impacted, and your confidence is going to, because you want them to be here, your ability and your confidence, you want them to be on the same level. You don't want them to be out of sync, because then problems happen. If you're overconfident, you're trying to do stuff thinking that you can do stuff that you can't. Like, you don't have the ability to actually do what you think you can. And then it's going to lead to mistakes. And then with those mistakes comes the realization that you're actually not as good as you think you are. And that feels like that sucks. And that's just not somewhere you want to be. And then similarly, the converse is true. So if you go, or inverse is true, where if you're lacking the confidence, your emotions are down here, but your real ability is like up here maybe, you're going to be limited. It's going to bring your ability down to the level of your confidence. And so you're going to be dropping ranks as a player. And, one thing that's important to think here is this sliding kind of mechanism within the range of performance. So we talk about the ABC game, where the A game is the top part of your performance range and the C game is the bottom. And so the confidence, so where your ability might be, could be anywhere within this range, but the confidence is going to be something that is going to be either matching it or is out of sync. And if it's moving up a little bit because of stuff that's going well in the game, your ability might improve a little bit with it. If it goes down because of stuff that's happening in the game, your ability might go down with it. So this is a dynamic to be aware of. So we need to understand, these two big pieces, like I said. So let's first talk about the stuff that happens in the game that you need to be resilient against, and what can we do here to create that confidence as a byproduct of how we approach the things happening to us. So first of all, you need to try and not be outcome oriented. That's one thing to just sort of start to think about. Am I impacted by the outcomes? In what ways? Start to create that awareness. Ask yourself those questions. Because when you're losing, when you're getting dominated in the game, often what can happen is people, and I've done this a lot, everyone does this. This is a very human thing to do. You feel like, oh man, this guy is just owning me. This team is owning me. Like, nothing I'm doing is working, and your confidence is dropping because nothing is working. So it feels like your ability, gets lower, and so then your confidence goes lower with it because it's just, affected by the outcome. So then you're like, fuck it, I'm just gonna ego swing this guy, and I'm gonna, prove that I'm better. Oh, smashing my mic. I'm gonna prove that I'm better by ego swinging him, and that's what I'm gonna do, and that's how I'm gonna get my confidence back. That is the wrong reasoning to do that. So there is actually a correct reasoning to do that. And the correct reasoning looks like this. Okay, this player or this team is better than me and in this particular game. And I'm trying to optimize to win right now in this particular game. So because of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to limit the amount of decisions that can be made. And I'm going to try to limit the amount of skill that can be exercised just to mechanics. Because then all of their extra skill that they have over me in terms of decision making and all of the rest, I'm limiting that artificially. So I'm going to sort of bring them down to my level, and I'm going to try to maximize the gamble that's happening in this game. I'm going to make it as gambly as possible because that's the only way I can win. Otherwise, because this guy's just better, I'm just going to, over the course of the game where there's like loads more decisions, each decision he's going to be slightly better, and that's going to add up in the long run. So I'm going to make it gambly. And so that's one justification for actually doing something like that. But it's not a justification if you're saying, I need to create confidence out of nothing. So that's wrong. And as I mentioned, confidence is a byproduct of both the stimulus that you're receiving as you're executing as a player, and also your actual ability and what you're doing with your actual ability. So when it comes to the outcomes, I think there's a lot of things that are really important here. So one of the big ones is creating a framework for success. So one of the ways you can do that is by, and as I've talked about in previous videos, is by making sure that you have goals and a vision for what you're doing, because this serves as a filter. And this filter, if you're honest with it, can be very, very powerful, because what it does is it says, okay, anything that's coming in, I will filter out the stuff that sucks and is not helping me to get towards that end goal or result, whether that's being a pro player or whether it's like, one of a shorter term goal, whatever it is. It's an alignment method, an alignment principle that allows me to align what's coming in with what I'm doing. And if it does not serve me, I get rid of it. If it's like, okay, so good quality practice is important. If I'm tilting, that's not going to serve my end goals of high quality practice. If my communication is bad because I'm getting demoralized or I sat down, and this is going to be encouraging maybe something that's bad because I want to maintain good communication, I need to practice this, or it's going to actually make for worse results in my practice as well. Okay, I got to have good communication. What does that tell me? Okay, well, now I need to adjust my mindset. When I go into my practice sessions every day, I have this agreement with myself of my mindset. I used to call this the champion's mindset, where I would create these rules for myself, these rules of play every day, where I would sit down and practice. I must do this. I must play disciplined. I must, make sure that I do certain things. And that is different for everybody. It can mean anything for anybody, but it's just having that high quality operating standard that you've decided that you sit down with every day and you stick to. And again, it acts as this filtering mechanism so that you're always pushing things towards the goal. So if you have a bad day of practice or like some bad games, or you're in your C game, let's do the process. Okay, is this good? Well, I got practice. It didn't feel like the best quality practice. Why did that happen? Okay, let's reframe it. I'm going to have bad days. I'm a human being. I will have some bad days of practice. That's normal. Everyone is going to experience that. But what I can do is I can try to figure out the best ways I can learn from this. And actually, if I zoom out enough, I'm going to have some bad days of practice. And this is just one of them. And what is it that I could have learned from this? And so that also helps you when you're having the bad days of practice, because it allows you to feel less shitty about it, because it's part of a process that's getting you closer towards your goals if you're reframing things correctly, filtering things correctly, setting up your mindset correctly, so that you're actually knowing that the time spent is valuable. And even if the result right now, the outcome right now is not favorable, you know that for the long term, it is going to be favorable. And that's really key, because a lot of people will, have this very back and forth relationship with long gratification, or delayed gratification, I should say, where, you know that, I mean, a lot of us have experienced it. I imagine if we've been grinding, it feels like you're not improving for a couple weeks. And then like 1 week, 3-4 weeks later, you're like, oh my God, I'm just better now, and it's just suddenly it just kind of feels like it happens out of nowhere. And sometimes it's very hard to wait around for that. And so having more things that can help us to kind of get there is really important. And so a lot of people that sit down and they just receive this stimulus, like, okay, someone's shitty to you over comms, they allow them, you allow yourself to get tilted. Now you've allowed somebody else to ruin your day. You've allowed somebody else to ruin your experience and to drop you from maybe, your B or your A game down to your C game, because you allowed yourself to be affected with that. And so you got to take that information, you got to put it into the filter and say, okay, is this helping me or not helping me? What can I do better next time to prevent that from being the case? And the reason why you're doing all of this, the reason why you're trying to optimize all these things, is because all of these things will increase your confidence, because as you have a constant processes to improve as a player, it gives you less of a reaction to the shitty things that happen, because you can always be like, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to find a way to make this actually work in my favor. And so that's giving you more reps of understanding that you can overcome stuff, which is a key aspect of confidence, because confidence issues typically can come in performances when you feel like, oh, I don't know if I can overcome this. When you're experiencing pressure, you can either allow the pressure in a match to essentially break you down, or you can use it as a challenge. And so practicing being in this challenge mindset all the time of, I can meet any challenges, I'm going to give myself evidence that I can overcome challenges, is really powerful, because you can have that's now confidence coming from how you deal with situations. It's not coming out of nothing. It's coming from you experiencing your own practices and your own approaches that you set for yourself. And over time, the confidence comes as a byproduct, because you've proven to yourself that not only can you outperform other players, you can take pride in the fact that the way you operate is at a high level, and that you operate in a way where you have proven again and again, there's a challenge, I can find a way to overcome it. I might not have the answer right now, but I'm going to find a way to overcome it. And when you're in a game, the confidence issues happen, like we mentioned in that area before about ego peaking. That's happening because you don't also have a good answer. And you can't also at that point make a good decision. Like I said, I said, okay, this is the good justification for this. If you're a player that's confident in your abilities, that means you understand your capacity, you understand your abilities. And so that also allows you to understand when maybe you're actually beat in certain areas. That's important information. You can't play a game of anything and look at an opponent who has, more capacity or like better whatever, an advantage, and say, oh, that advantage doesn't exist. That doesn't make sense. That is data. That is data in reality that you need to then use to try to find a way around that problem. If you don't have the real numbers, you can't get the right solution. So you have to be able to be sort of in this place where your emotions are not dictating how you feel about stuff. Because again, in that example of the ego peak situation, you're basically saying, I know I'm better than this guy. Well, maybe you're not right now. You might not be better than that guy right now. What is the game telling you? That's very important. So with all of that said, we've got the frameworks, we've got the approaches, the goals, the visions, we've got the champion's mindset, setting your mind, all of these things, filtering the bad things out, filtering the good things in, reframing stuff so it serves you, giving yourself evidence you can overcome challenges. Super key. The next thing is having good actual practice. So understanding how you can have systems maybe to improve when you're dealing with stuff that is giving you problems in the game. So if you are in a situation where it feels like the other guy's out shooting you, you can ask yourself the question, do I have what systems do I have to kind of deal with this in terms of my practice? Is it the case that I need to work on my positioning or my movement or my aim, or I need to work on my decision making, the theory? Is it a knowledge problem? Because when we talk about the A, B, and C game, and when we also talk about, in the previous video I made about the 4 stages of competency, the third stage from the bottom is conscious competency. But to get there, we talked about how it's a knowledge problem. You need to have the right knowledge, and then the ability to have a good approach. So knowledge plus approach to integrate the improvement, and then to rehearse it enough times that then you get to the top of the pyramid, which is the unconscious competence. So with all of that said, it might be a knowledge problem. Do I have the right understanding of the situation to know what it is I should be doing differently? And then I can put that into my approach. So that's the first thing that you have to understand. And one of the ways I think that's really, really useful to do this, that's kind of like a little hack, I suppose, in certain ways I like to do it, is to try to categorize things. What type of situation, what type of player, is it an aggressive player on a certain map, on a certain side, or whatever it might be? What are the protocols I'm going to give myself to deal with this kind of approach? And how do you create those protocols? It's a knowledge thing. You understand principally what is strong or weak about what they're doing. I'm going to use my experience to inform this as well. And then now I'm going to have a system where I'm going to play in a kind of certain types of way when the player I'm playing is a really aggressive, very disruptive player. Okay, over time of trying to use this system, you're going to face different types of players that have maybe different variations of that style. And then you can then optimize over time. This is what practice is really for. It's about this constant kind of iterative process of optimization in terms of what is coming at you. And so over time, you're like, okay, I've got this system. And then you can understand how to operate within your system, as opposed to just saying, I'm just going to have no system and I'm just going to play. I'm just going to grind. As opposed to just, because the thing about the system is you don't necessarily have to stick to it, but it gives you a way to process the information and to think about the information and to have an approach that is somewhat consistent. And when you have a consistent approach, it means that you can change parts of it if you feel like parts of it do or do not work. So it gives you something to work from that's solid. Whereas if you're just going for it and have nothing, no frameworks, no systems at all in how you play or approach situations, you actually don't have any dials or levers to kind of pull or push. You don't know where the problem is because you haven't defined any of the positions. You haven't defined any of the actions. You haven't really looked at it in that way. So it's very hard to analyze if you don't do it in that fashion. So that's why I like to do it that way, because it gives me the ability to look at something I haven't seen before and to really say, okay, does this fit into an existing system and I'm just not optimized for it? Or do I need to create a new system entirely? Or, what do I need to do to change the outcome of this? And so that's one way that I would come into a new scenario and be like, okay, I'm getting owned. I have a knowledge problem. I have to create like a framework or a system to then kind of fill the knowledge in. And then I can start to, approach the practice in a certain way that will help me to integrate that. And then hopefully over time, I improve at that situation. So as you increase your level and your capacity as a player, because again, if you don't do that, then you're just going to you can't really increase your confidence. You have to be actually increase your level to actually keep your confidence, matching with it, and it's going to go up with it. So the level will bring up the confidence, much like in a game where if you're hitting some shots, if this is your A and C game, if you're hitting some shots, you might have your confidence go up a little bit because you're hitting shots, and then you might pull yourself a little bit up, a little bit closer towards your, the topper end of your game. And if you're missing a lot of shots, then okay, well, obviously you're missing shots, and that is actually part of the definition of the A, B, and C game, is that, oh, if my aim is actually worse, then my confidence goes down because it's an estimation of my abilities. I have the evidence feeding back to me from the game, showing me that I'm actually a little bit lower in my performance range at the moment because I'm missing some of these shots. So that's a way to kind of think about it. So you have to be able to raise the level of your game to be a confident player, and I think that's pretty clear. So now that we've looked at like these two major areas, I think you can start to understand how confidence can be a byproduct of good processes, and in terms of both how you increase your level as a player, but also in terms of how you handle situations in the game and how you handle yourself as a player that's playing and taking pride in the fact that you put a lot of effort into having high operating standards. One thing about confidence too is it's really key that confidence is something that you're giving yourself examples of through these processes, because when we have pressure in real matches, pressure is the biggest problem. Like it's pressure hits you, and if you have mental game leaks, it's going to press on those. If you have any issues in confidence, it's going to press on those things. So by giving yourself this evidence of, I can overcome these situations, and I love meeting the challenge. I love the challenge. It energizes me. It excites me because I love having opportunities to overcome, to find solutions, because that's what you're practiced in doing all the time. You're going to feel at home when you're in pressure. But for a lot of players, they don't have this. And so when the pressure comes on, they're way too affected by the outcomes of the game in the game, and their confidence is just going all over the place, and their abilities going all over the place with it. They don't feel comfortable or stable. And the issue with that is that when you have emotions impacting you too much, and it can be to the point where your limbic system activates, your lizard brain activates, and you actually get dumber. Your cognitive capacity actually drops when that happens. You're not going to be able to input all of this, like this feedback from the game as data to then react with the decision making that you've come about to with all of your hundreds of hours of practice. And that's when you're going to perform best, like we talked about in the fourth stage of the top of the pyramid of the 4 stages of competency, unconscious competency. The only way to be there is to be in that kind of dialed in state where we're not having to think about anything really all that much. We're just absorbing all the information, and we're able to have almost all of the bandwidth available to just take in the data, the macro data, the micro data, the data from the teammates, everything I'm seeing, and suddenly you're letting your intuition act off of that data. You're super dialed in. As soon as the emotions come in, you don't know what you're doing, it's a situation that you're finding kind of difficult, suddenly you're kind of now spending more time with that cognitive, not able to put that cognitive bandwidth on being as dialed into the game, and it's going elsewhere. And so you're not going to be able to perform as best, and you're not going to be able to be in the zone as much. So with all of that said, I think it's a good way to cap off this video. Confidence is a byproduct of your approaches, your practice, your mindset. It's how you handle stuff. And it's by giving yourself the frequent examples that you are bigger than this one game because you have this long-term goal. You are able to overcome difficult challenges. You're able to take pride in the fact that when other people get demotivated, you're still finding solutions. You're still trying to stick it in there and say, I'm gonna meet this challenge, and I'm gonna find a way to overcome it. And I don't have to succeed. I don't have to succeed in it right now because it's just one experience. And if I try my best to deal with this, then I can actually convert that more effectively into better training and more pride and more confidence as a player that I can deal with this stuff, and that eventually, over enough time, I'm going to win, even if I'm not having a winning day today. So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this long video about confidence. I'll catch you guys on the next one.